McLean. I'm your host. I'm excited to welcome our panel members for this month's collaborative event, Australia's leading high-performance facilities. Before we start this episode, our mission here at Prepare Like a Pro is to empower aspiring athletes and staff with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals and to strengthen the AFL community. If you like the show, please show your support by following us on Instagram and subscribing to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Our first guest for the show tonight is Lachlan Wilmot, the co-founder of Athletes Authority. And without further ado, his topic is going to be on managing a high-performance facility for athletes. So welcome, Lach.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me, mate.
Thanks for jumping on. We'll dive straight into it, mate. Take us through, from a coach perspective, you've worked in high-performance sport at the top level, as well as now in doing great things in the private sector. What are the pros and cons of the two?
Well, I think when I was shifting across from pro to private, I thought the hours might have been a little bit better. But then when I moved over, I lost two of my coaches. We rolled into fires. We rolled into a blackout. We rolled into COVID. So it's been a good fun 2 years in the private sector, mate. So I think my opinion's probably a little bit skewed. But there's no doubt for me, from a family point of view, the hours are significantly better, especially around the weekends and everything. So the pros for private are probably a little bit more controllable with ours. I think one of the big things, people often ask me, do I miss pro sport and stuff like that? And to be honest, I think it's a little bit like high school. I think once you graduate high school, you look back and you think, fuck, how good was high school? You know, socially, you're with your friends every day and stuff like that. You kind of forget all the assessments and all the annoying work and stuff you had to actually do. And I think pro sport's a little bit like that. I think like when I watch the games these days, it is something that I miss a lot, game day. I think that feeling of game day, the preparation of game day, there really is nothing like it. And in spite of working with a lot of really good quality athletes across the private sector and preparing them for game day, it's not the same when you're not in the team and you're not turning up game day ready to go. So that's probably a big part that's very hard to replicate. But with all due respect, from that point of view, the culture and the community that we have at Athletes Authority is something that for me, the private sector is all about creating that team sport feel within the private community. That riding the wave of success of each of the athletes is certainly something that I love, and I think from a private setting is something that we can do. And I think maybe sometimes, 10 years ago, probably too many people treated it just like a gym, and people turned up and trained. They had their own individual things to do, and then they left. But I think, to be honest, with all credit to CrossFit's probably showed us what a community can be, regardless of what you think about CrossFit. And everyone that's on tonight, manage a phenomenal facility and realistically have an amazing community. Hence why they're successful and where they are. And I think we can all attest that the private sector is starting to build some really strong athletic communities that people can be a part of. And to be honest, that's what I loved about team sport, and that's what's building in the private sector.
Yeah, I love that, mate. You mentioned community. Is that something that COVID has almost raised your awareness on the impact that facilities like yours do have an impact on the community once you take it away?
Look, I think it is. I think the COVID issue was something that, I look at, for example, let's take Anytime Fitness. Like at the end of the day, most Anytime Fitness franchises don't really have a community, but they're all owned by very similar small business owners as that's on now. Like, I mean, they paid X amount for a franchise. They're a small business owner. They're not the juggernaut that is Fitness First or Virgin Active that's owned by a multinational corporation. They are small business owners. And when COVID hit, they shut down. And guess what? No one was around to support them. No community was there to really back them, because that they probably didn't have the same community as the people that are on now. And when it looks like, for me anyway, I'm not an emotional person, but I must admit, when we got pushed into lockdown, our athletes made a video for us, and so many got around us and supported us and stuff like that. And for me, that was unbelievable. So I think the community is not necessarily, I don't necessarily think COVID created it, but it certainly probably identified the power of it and how strong our community is. without actually realising.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, something I picked up on was making impact with the athletes. Do you feel, I know you miss game day, and that makes a lot of sense from a competitive point of view, and everyone all in on game day performance, that is hard to replicate. But from a making an impact as a coach, do you feel like the private sector, you actually move the needle a lot more with the athletes' development?
Yeah, 100% you do. I think in professional sport, you know, as strength and conditioning coaches, we probably have a percentage of athletes that we impact more than others. Typically, when it comes to the superstars that are very talented, our influence on them can often be less. The older athlete, often our influence can be sustaining careers for a little bit longer. But obviously, in the AFL was a classic example. We were getting athletes at 17 and 9 months. To be able to influence them was really big. And that's what we do in the private sector. You know, we get these athletes that's sometimes as young as 9 years of age. And we can have a huge influence on their routine, their habit, what they value, why they value it. And I think as well, that's what the private sector can be quite powerful with, that we can bring in these 10, 11-year-olds and they can look across the facility, especially, you know, I can only speak for ours, but I know a lot of the facilities on here are similar, that they'll have a high-performing elite senior athlete that may be in the same sport, maybe even in the same position that this young athlete's at, and they can look across the room and go, geez, well, that's what I want to be like. That's what I need to get to. And their value on strength and conditioning increases significantly versus that 10-year-old, 11-year-old going to a Fitness First or a Virgin Active and just doing weights. I think they can start to see that the process that values, and that's what you get in pro sport. You get a 17, 18-year-old coming to your club and they want to play midfield, and they see a 25, 26-year-old midfielder might be, you know, bench pressing 120 kilos or squatting or jumping or throwing med balls around and going, you know, that's what I need to do to be that good. I think we can influence that in the private sector far more than your average gym. And I think obviously the people that are on here, you can see that the average gym is now changing because these are performance facilities. These are ones that are going to govern our young athletes and build them into something more.
Yeah, it's exciting, mate. It's something we're talking about off air about, you know, when you look at this panel compared to 10 years ago in Australia, how fast we are catching the American culture with private sector, which is maybe something at the end of discussion, if we get time for, it'd be good to hear everyone's thoughts around that and how fast we are gaining on it in America in that space.
We're not getting any attractive, mate, but we're certainly improving our performance, I think, by the looks of it.
Too much time put in coaching, making everyone else looking better, hey? What about for the coach's perspective? Like, do you feel from a development point of view, if you had to pick one to start with, would you prefer developing yourself in the high performance sport realm, or do you think private sector is a better place to start?
To be brutally honest, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't think the category is the maker. It's the coaches around you that will make it. If you're in high performance sport with terrible people, it's not great. By the same token, if you're in the private sector with terrible people, it's not great. I do believe when it comes to a lot of young coaches at the moment, I still, and to be honest, I don't think it's going to change. I think the shininess of a pro sport logo is always going to be attractive to coaches. And that's not to say it shouldn't be. I think there's a lot of amazing things in pro sport. Like, I mean, the experiences I had were phenomenal. But again, it depends who you're with. You know, I've got a young coach that works at my facility that worked in the private sector, wanted to give pro sport a go, gave it a go, didn't like it, and now has come back. And for me, that's the powerful part, that I would always prefer a coach that went to pro sport, didn't like it, and has come back and has to rebuild a little bit, rather than a young coach that has always got that desire to go, oh, well, I want to give pro sport a go, but I'm not sure whether I'll like it or not. So look, I don't think there's one or the other. I think it's got to be based on the environment you're going into and the coaches you're with. So whether it's private, whether it's pro, I think both have amazing positives and negatives in a certain extent. But realistically, it's quality people. You know, again, referring back to the panel here, if you're lucky enough to work with some of the people on this panel, well, amazing. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean pro sport's going to be better. But by the same token, if you get an opportunity in pro sport and there's good quality people, one of my best mates, Sel and Crichton, he's at Melbourne at the moment. Like, if you've got an opportunity to work in that environment with him, fantastic. I'd say take it any day of the week. But it's probably down to the people and the community within the performance setting. So the physios that are going to be working there, the strength and conditioning coaches, the high performance manager, to an extent, the head coach, what do they believe in? What do they want to push? And it's the same with private setting. If you've got good quality people around, I'd say you can't go wrong regardless.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Thanks for shedding light on that. And then in terms of for the coaches listening in, do you feel in your experience there's personality traits and coaching skill sets that are more suited to private sector compared to high performance sport, or do you think a good coach is a good coach?
Personally, I think a good coach is a good coach. I've got Woody here trying to wrap me up, so clearly his use of the voice is terrible because he's trying to text here. But we can certainly think, I think, from a private and a pro. My strongest coaches are those ones that have had experience in team environments. Now, that's not to put down anyone that works individual, but our environment is on a gym floor in group settings. So my strongest coaches are those ones that have worked in group settings. That doesn't mean it has to be pro, but it certainly has to be at a level where they have to control a team environment. I probably find that people that go into the private setting need to have a far more sales-orientated influence, because at the end of the day, they actually need to sell the service a little bit more. In an environment of professional, they don't need to go out and get sales, but you still need to sell what you're doing to the athlete. They are very similar, but they're also very different in nature. So I would probably say if you want to go into the private setting, you've got to have a little bit of mongrel about you about going out and getting leads and attracting people, attracting teams, attracting individuals. If you're in the pro setting, you probably need to work out how you sell your program more than sell a company or get leads in. So I don't think that really answers it very well for you, but I think it's summary. There is no specific trait that I think is going to transfer better to pro, better to private, because like I said at the beginning, the facilities on here and my facility as well, our whole goal is to start to breed a performance mentality. And that's exactly what we do in the pro setting, exactly what you do in the private setting. So I think the carryover and the crossover is way too familiar. But if you had to pick one nuance, it would probably be when you're in the private setting, you've got to try and sell the company more and get that name out there. In the pro setting, you've probably got to sell your program a little bit more to the individuals.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like you said, similar goals in mind, but one's commercial and then one's more, I guess, performance-based, but yes, the traits are transferable, which is probably the main thing for coaches listening. You're going to benefit development-wise by being in a good environment, like you said, in both settings. So, no, I love it, mate. Love your work. For those listening in that are a coach or an athlete, where can we find Athlete Authority, and what is the best place to get in contact with you guys?
The old socials are probably the easiest. On Instagram at Athletes Authority. That's an easy follow, and then I'm at Performance Coach _Wilmot. But feel free to follow both. But you'll probably get one or the other on one of them. So go for it.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Fantastic. That's set us off for the first one. Thanks, Locke. We next have Jared Kay. He's the founder of Six Principle and the Speed Project located in Melbourne. Jared will be discussing layering sprint training with gym training in the midst of training for sport. So welcome, Jared. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Oh, hold on. That's my bad. Got to unmute you. There we go.
We're on?
We're on.
All right, yep. Thanks for having us, Jack. Looking forward to having a bit of a chat here.
Thanks for jumping on, and we'll jump straight into it, mate. So, in what circumstances do you adjust the training program for an athlete in a sport setting?
Well, I guess coming from here, we've got mostly coaches or allied health staff and athletes who are all playing. So if you think about the average person's week these days, whether they be school aged, whether they be university aged, or whether they be out in the workforce working full time, Time. That's the one thing. It's probably our biggest barrier as a coach and what we can do for our athletes. We look at, they might be at sport training 2 to 3 times a week. They might have a high performance club they're associated with, whether they're down here in Victoria playing NAB or private school. They might go to a public school where they've got a sports academy, and then they might be trying to fit in recovery sessions, 2-time gym sessions, and then their school, homework, and or work. So time becomes the biggest constraint. And when we look at, I think from an industry point of view now, we've gotten really good at strength and conditioning, I would say. And now what we found at the Speed Project and why we started this business during COVID, mainly because our gyms were closed and we were locked out of them, was speed was that necessary missing link to the total puzzle. And I'm going to talk about that puzzle analogy a little more, because at the moment, I think a lot of us are constrained by our facility size. When I was over in America, I went to this gym, Parisi Speed Performance, and they had a 60-meter Mondo track in their facility. So they could hit some kind of top speed work, where all of us, size and space is a big limitation, especially down here in Melbourne. We're lucky if we have 15, 20 meters of turf to access. So acceleration is something that's really well worked into programs. But if we think about what our athletes are doing week in, week out, they're just accelerating every time at training. That's what the main quality of sprinting that they're going to continuously hit. So max velocity becomes that missing piece of the puzzle. And that's where we say, all right, how do we layer sprint training and how do we include max velocity, that exposure to these high speed loads into an athlete's program when we're battling all the barriers that are going against it, such as sport training and gym and everything else on top of it. So that's the part of the puzzle that we like to explore, and we sit down with our athletes and work out how we can best do this.
But mate, and you mentioned your time in America. Is that where the penny dropped, that there was a bit of a missing piece in Australia's athlete development side of things?
Yeah, athletics is such a big thing over there. It's such a big component of a junior athlete's life. Most of them will be absolute track freaks. The Victorian state champion that runs a sub 12 here in under 16s isn't coming close to their heats over there. Like, they've got kids over there, 15, 16-year-olds already running 11 scratch. So athletics is a big thing over there, and it really builds what their total athlete comes from. So a lot of these athletes over there get exposure to high quality sprint coaching. How many footballers can you say have been exposed to high quality sprint coaching that come through these high performance pathways from under 16 and above? I like to refer to this in a manner of, all right, is it necessary? There's outliers and there's anomalies. Like, we look at Dane Swan. Everyone here would have watched Dane Swan play and marveled at the way that he could dominate a game. He probably had one of the most awkward running styles ever. I spoke to some Collingwood staff about this. Did you ever try to change it? No way. We're not going to try to change Dane Swan. The guy won a Brownlow medal, but what can we do for the rest of the population that isn't an anomaly? And what can we do to help provide that missing link of speed training to our athletes? So in America, I take from a lot what they do. They're the best nation at athletics in the world. So we're trying to instill those principles that they implement over there into our youth athlete development programs over here. So that long-term athlete development is a key concept that we're really trying to build.
Yeah. And you mentioned the circumstances where you need to adjust the program and how you have a holistic approach, taking into their school stress and sport and house sports with school and other club football and all the different stresses they have. Is that something that you do through athlete feedback with, is it wellness? Is it like catching up with them when they're in the gym? Talk us through for the coaches how we can access that information with, I guess, a young demographic.
So a lot of it comes down to the feedback component, how the athlete's feeling. We want to monitor that. We know that they're going to hit their acceleration efforts in training, and we can work that in the gym pretty easily. So what we do is we try to encourage that when we can implement that max velocity exposure, so real high speed running, is when they're going to have a day previous that they're off legs. So if they've got any recovery days, so a Monday morning is typically really good for those who are playing sport on a Saturday, if they're not too sore or in this current pre-season preparation period. Or we look to develop sprinting qualities in the gym. So this is another way that we can kind of implement exposure to qualities that are going to develop max speed in a gym environment. So a lot of it will come down to how the athlete's feeling on the day. And the adaptability as a coach is probably one of our key strengths, and that's why we're all in this room tonight. We're adaptable, and we've probably faced many different challenges in athlete programs when you've got the kid who comes in with a cast on his arm and you didn't know because he broke his arm yesterday. So adaptability as a coach is a key skill.
And you mentioned the importance of getting the programming right with the other stresses that they have. How do you go about, like, for the athletes listening that haven't done track and field and are interested to improve their speed development? What's a way that you integrate, I guess, the raw athletes into your programming?
Yeah, we look to start a base, and it's looking to understand why we're doing certain things. All of our athletes would have done an A march and an A skip. This is a classic exercise that it's in all football warm-ups. But do they actually understand why they're doing it and what the purpose of the exercise is? All right, we're trying to drive force into the ground. We're trying to point our toes more forwards than downwards. How can we make these things relatable to the athlete without telling them what to do? We don't want to always be telling them what to do and giving them the answers. We want them to give us the answers. So starting from a base understanding about why we're doing certain drills, how it's going to benefit them, how it's going to help them. And then much like any kind of adaptation we're trying to achieve, whether it be in the gym, whether it be running or sprinting, we look to start slow, all right? You can't just go bull out of a gate and start sprinting 2-3 times a week, because your body's just not going to be able to handle it. It's not going to be used to the demands, even though you think sprinting, and from an athlete point of view, a lot of them think, oh, sprinting is something I do multiple times a week in every game and training I play. But are you actually sprinting with intent to get faster, or are you just running fast? So that's what we like to educate our athletes with early in the process, and really go through with them about the whys we're doing things and make them to be able to understand it so they can get that learning effect from it.
Yeah. And another one for the athletes, how important is the surface that you're doing your speed development on?
We really encourage to develop key sprinting qualities on a track. If you don't have access to a track, grass is fine as well. Obviously, the track's going to give you this a little extra benefit of foot stiffness. It's more pliable surface than grass. So plus, you put a kid in a track environment as to a grass environment, they already start thinking, all right, I'm at the track. This is where I watched the Olympics. I watched the 100-meter final. You know what I'm going to do? It starts playing into their psychology. They're actually going to start running with more intent and running faster and running harder when they're doing it. So we try to just encourage them to implement the drills into their program when they can. And one of the biggest takeaways is, all right, if you can't get to our sessions weekly, or you're struggling to find time, get down to training half an hour earlier. Go through your mobility warm-up, do your physical preparation stuff, do your necessary drills for what we're looking to develop, and go out and run 2 efforts. And then the education on what sprint training actually is, all right, if you're going to run a 50, 60, 70-meter effort, we want you to rest for 5, 6, 7 minutes afterwards. It's not go out and run as hard and fast as you can for 60 meters, walk back and then do it again. Because from physiological demands, we know that they're not going to be able to replenish their energy system enough so that the next effort is at that high intensity that we want to see. If you're training speed, you've got to be able to respect the energy systems and make sure that we're getting sufficient rest so that we're actually hitting speed and it doesn't become a conditioning session. Because conditioning sessions are very, very easy to run. All right. A lot of us can do that. It's the difference of how we actually implement proper rest periods so that we can then go again.
Awesome, mate. You can tell the education aspect, and like you said, understanding the purpose. The footballers may have come in and done the drills before, but you're educating them on how to do them well and with quality, and not only focus on your speed, but you're doing your training to improve your max speed, and how important intent is. So you mentioned some key pillars to focus on in terms of speed development. With the facility, what are some common mistakes that you see current athletes and specifically footballers, that seems to be your niche, are making, and what are the best ways to sort of correct it for us coaches listening in?
I don't like to necessarily label them as mistakes. because everything has its place. Like if we look at a sled push rather than a sled pull, you could argue that a sled pull is probably more contextual based because you get to use the arms. Does everyone have the availability of a sled that they can tow? And does everyone have the space that's necessary to develop acceleration if we're looking to do that in the gym? Or is it going to be easier for us to implement a prowler or a sled and push and work on force through the ground and work on getting into those positions? So I think the key mistakes is something that I've referred to before. It's just not respecting the rest periods that are needed to be able to keep intensity up at the levels we want. We want to try and get our sprint efforts at 100% each time. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then it's also respecting the field itself. All right. A lot of us, we've got a very diverse set of skills. I would like to think that a lot of us are a jack of all trades when it comes to the high performance kind of umbrella. But if you want to start actually understanding and implementing sprint coaching with your athletes or with a team that you work with, go out and learn from some of the best. Go out and do a sprint course. Go out and do your athletics coaching course so that you actually understand the base principles and start to develop and build up in that way. So that's probably where I'd leave it there.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Final question for us. You decided to own an area in the field. Like you said, you felt like strength and conditioning as well covered and speed was the missing link. For coaches and business owners listening in, how important was that from a marketing, commercial point of view, really owning your niche?
We just saw the gap in the market. And for Melbourne, a lot of people, like I look around the room here and there's some of my biggest competitors and some of them are even a stone's throw away. And I go, how can I set myself apart from what they're doing? So I try to go back to the relationships and the connections I had. And I asked some of these guys that are playing AFL, has anyone ever taught you how to sprint? And they go, no, never. And I think that became an attractor for them in the realm that if they came to me and young kids are going to look up to them and go, oh, this guy trains there, then maybe I should train there. I've got to be offering something different, something unique, and be able to have a good relationship with them. So I guess COVID really forced our hand here. My business partner, Ash Gudgeon, he was the sprint guy that I was picking his brain throughout COVID, and we started meeting up at an local oval and started going through some key principles of sprinting. And I said, you know what all my athletes need? They need to learn how to run. They need to learn how to sprint. Speed training is something that isn't necessarily done really well in a gym. It's done well on a track or a field. So it was, I guess COVID was a blessing in a way, as painful as it was. And we're kind of just running with it now. And I hope that all these guys in the room just leave me to my thing.
Awesome, mate. No, I think we will. You're doing a good job. And love the work you're doing and the impact you're having on the industry. So thanks for jumping on again tonight and sharing your knowledge with us and your experiences for the coaches and athletes that are tuned in. Where is the best place to find yourself and where is Six Principal located as well?
So Six Principals in Moorabbin. We're a little tucked away gym. I have to take a leaf out of everyone's books here and start building our social media presence a little more. But you can find us at the Six Principal. We've got a great team of coaches there that are all starting to really make waves in the industry and pave their own paths. The Speed Project, you can catch us at the Speed Project Mel. And then my own personal one is at coach.jaredk. So that's where all that information is. And as I'm an open book, I'm always happy to chat to coaches and athletes alike and help them in any way I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
Next up, we have Crichton Woodford, the owner-founder of Woodford Sports Science Consulting, located in Melbourne. His topic will be creating brand awareness and how to stand out, coaching athletes in a crowded industry. Woody, there you go, mate. Hold on. Oh, fuck. Wait.
Okay. Jack, you hear me?
Oh, that was you this time. There we go. I thought I unmuted it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Now, before I start, I just want to, for everyone who doesn't know the person next to me, his name's Chris DeCranis, Coach DeCranis. The reason why I'm bringing him on, he actually just got given an internship, he earned an internship at Iowa in their football department Well, you want to explain them? Just quickly tell them what you got.
Yeah, so Woody pretty much just said to me that I needed to take that next step. I was just too comfortable in the gym. So obviously he'd been to America, so I applied and went through the stages. Now got an internship at Iowa University, and thankfully, he allowed me to come on. So I just want to listen to you all and just keep learning.
I just thought I'd bring him on, just help keep developing, help improve his communication skill set. So hopefully that's okay, Jack. I didn't ask you beforehand, so anyway,
you can tune in with the rest of the listeners.
I thought he'd sit next to me. That's the main thing.
No, that's fine, mate. We're all friendly here. Let's dive into your first question, mate. How is what is your strategy and philosophy, and how has it evolved over the years from a brand awareness point of view?
Listen, I'll be completely honest with you. I've really never really had, honestly, a strategy behind Woodford. The main thing has always been being authentic. And I think a lot of kids who come out of uni, look, anyone in general, you're always going to have someone who you idolize. And for me, that was DeFranco. Like he was the man. And I looked at, when I started in 2012, Woodford 2012, there was really no one out there, bar Durham, who was doing his thing at, correct me if I'm wrong, Bodyworld, I'm pretty sure. But in terms of heavy promotion, I mean, I started Woodford before, I was just doing it on Facebook. And I think the big thing that I wanted to get across was what could I offer athletes and non-athletes in terms of, so they wanted to train with me. So kind of I wanted to give as much education, as much free information as I could as possible, so they could actually use that and apply it with their own training. And I think that comes back to being as authentic as possible, because I think people kind of look towards somebody and says, oh, this is the coach, he could be a loud coach. It doesn't really matter what you are. It's just kind of being yourself. That's the most important thing. I think a lot of people, especially when we have interns come to Woodford, I think a lot of them think that they have to be loud. They've got to be like me, where that's definitely not the case. I don't want another me. I just want people to be themselves. That's the most important thing, because people gravitate towards that. And I think that was my big thing when I started Woodford, was I was going to be myself. That was the first thing, regardless of what anyone said. I mean, so many people said, you can't act that way, you can't swear that way. I did it my own fucking way. And I think that's the one thing I'm very proud of, especially myself at Woodford and the brand, is I've done it my own way. And that's the most important thing for everyone watching out there now, is always be yourself. Don't try and be someone that you're not, because you will get found out. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I've built the Woodford brand off, is authenticity and giving you as much usable applied information as possible. Because if people can relate to that, and people can understand that, they're going to come towards you. And I've even had athletes, Jack, who have followed Woodford they've even said 6, 7, 8 years. It might be on the 8th year, they've actually decided to call me up or call Karen up and said, look, I want to come train at Woodford. How do we go from here? So it's taken 8 years, but after that 8th year, that's finally happened. So you've got to stay consistent with your message, and you've got to stay, in my opinion, high-level training content. You have to. Social media is such an important tool to use for your advantage.
That ties in well, mate. It makes a lot of sense. You mentioned how important it is to be authentic from the start.
Yeah.
And I can imagine if you're authentic, it's a lot easier to do that on a daily basis, which is what your last comment was there, the impact of being persistent and consistency.
Yeah. I mean, for me, you can look at videos from when I first started to now. It's pretty much I'm the same person. So people always say to my mates, what's he like? Is he like that in real life? I'm exactly the same person. You can ask Wilmot that. You can ask Timmy that. You can ask Jared that. I'm the same person in real life, regardless. And I think that's the most important thing. Even for me, when I met DeFranco, he's exactly the same person in real life. And that's what you want. You don't want you don't want to be meeting someone you've followed for 8 to 9 to 10 years and they're being completely different. So it's important that authenticity in you being yourself.
And I think off air we're talking about you're going to follow a script, which it doesn't look like you are. But
no, I'm not going to. That's a good point. I thought I should, but no, I'm not going to.
No scripts. So, what in terms of scripts, scheduling, organisation, things like that, how much of your week is planned, and how much of it is off the cuff, on the fly?
Yourself? I've actually got my operations manager next to me, who she does. Listen, my personal opinion for everyone out there is to get someone who's going to run the back end. If you're lucky enough to have enough money in your business, or find someone who cares about you that much, they're willing to put their life on hold for you, definitely give that side of your business to that person. Unless you love that back end and you love that side of the business.
Yeah.
For me, I don't like that. I'm not the best at organization. I'm pretty much off the cuff with everything I do. I mean, I've done that many presentations in front of 50 to 60, 70 people, and I haven't planned anything. It's come off the top of my head. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. I don't think anyone should do it the way I do it, but that's just what works for me. I just come from the heart. So I think in terms of planning, Kieran will plan my week for me. She'll get in contact, mostly, generally speaking, with my athletes. We'll put up in terms of plan the whole week out. I've got podcasts. I've got other things that I have to structure up. But for everyone out there listening, my suggestion is if you don't like that side of it, find someone who you can trust, who can structure your time out. That's very important to understand, because time management is such a big thing. I think I've wasted so many hours before I met Kieran, just wasting it, just planning things. You know, if you can get someone to do that side, you can pay them. Definitely do that, Jack, because it saves a lot of time, and you're a lot more organized as well. Because Kieran will just call me or message me, say you got this show through at 12, you got this athlete, you got these 4 athletes at this time, you got this podcast on this time, and it's really good to structure my week.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it's great advice. Like you mentioned, you got to know your strengths, and then know areas that you need assistance with, and we all have a team that helps us out to allow us to do what we do best.
Yeah.
How did you come? Was that DeFranco that recommended that, like in terms of systems and delegating and building a team around you, or is that something that just built naturally?
I think
your
that
experience?
Obviously I've had many conversations with Joe about back end and about business. He's helped me a lot with it. But I think Kieran, with her background, I've got to give her respect. And she is right here, so I should always give her respect anyway. But she has changed my life in terms of always being there for me, always structuring up, and that's her strength. So I think what you were saying was everyone's going to have their strengths and weaknesses. That's the same with my staff. So me sending young Dirk Dirk got it, but helping him out to go to Iowa in the football department's huge, because when he comes back, I'm looking at kind of changing up a bit and him taking my position and me moving back a little bit more, which he does anyway because he's so good at his job. That's just going to help him grow and help more strengths within the business. Then you got Jeremy, who looks after all the members. We've got different, in terms of our staff, we've got different strengths, different weaknesses, but everyone's going to have a strength. Everyone's going to have a weakness. It's important that you fill the gaps with the weaknesses that you have with strengths around you. So that's one good thing that I think we're building within Woodford. And I've got to thank Locke and Carl as well. I always got to thank Locke and Carl because they helped when Kieran went there. They opened their arms to us as well. And they've been, Locke and Carl been brilliant towards us. So we really do appreciate them at Athletes Authority, because they opened up and talked about how they structure up. And we without plugging them too much, Locke, Jack, but Kieran and I did their immersion program, which I think every coach should do in terms of the back end. Yeah, you can pay me later, Locke. But I think I think it was brilliant because we came back from it even more passionate, even more driven. It was fantastic. I don't want to pump them up too much because they get enough, but they know how much I respect them.
No, and it's awesome for guys like yourself, leader in the industry, to go out and self-develop and do courses like that, which is leadership, mate.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant, and to see Locke, and they're just great people. More than anything, honestly, just good people. I had to put up with you for 3 days. That's payment. Yeah, that's probably true. I can't talk about them enough, how much I respect them. And we've got like this kind of bond now, all of us, like especially all these guys here. I spend time with Timmy as well, helping each other out, which is an important thing in this industry we should do, because when I started in 2012, I kind of felt a bit alone. I know I had Durham as well, but now it's kind of grown into this high performance sector. I've talked to Locke about this as well. It's going to keep growing and growing and growing. So I'm very excited to what's going to happen to the private sector over the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and then the other part of your topic is standing out in a crowded industry. What are your top tips for coaches?
Listen, the first one, I can't say this enough, is using social media as a means to get what do you believe in out? I think so many people don't use social media enough. Let's forget about the algorithm, all that stuff. But I think high level, and you look at my mate from my good mate Jamie Smith from Melbourne Strength Culture. They've started a new podcast on YouTube, and it's been fantastic. And I think that's another area where we're gonna pick up again. We're gonna start my show again. Is that YouTube area, which so many people watch. It has so much reach with involved, because if you're gonna watch a long video, you're gonna go to YouTube. That's why all these other social media means like Instagram and Facebook, they're chasing YouTube. So I think YouTube's a big one. Getting content out on YouTube's a big one. But it's just pushing across a message. What do you believe in? Show your athletes training, show your passion, show you what you believe in, show your knowledge. Don't be afraid about giving away free information. I think I'll bring back to 2012 when I first started. People used to say to me, "Oh, don't give away. You can't give away free content. You don't want to do that. People aren't going to pay." I saw it differently that way. I saw it the free. I was showing people my passion. I was showing people my knowledge. So if you train with me, this is what you're going to get. These are the results you're going to get. This is the focus, and this is how much I care. So I think that's the first thing, is showing through social media what you believe in. But I think the biggest thing is, and Chris and I, Coach DeCranis and I talked about this before, is showing that you care. I think that's a big one in the industry, is showing that you actually do care. And you do want to get the best results for your client athlete. That's a very important thing, is showing you care, because there's a lot of people out there who don't care about results. They kind of just doing it for the money. All these guys here, for everyone out there, they actually do care. That's why they're at the pinnacle at the moment. And I think that you got to really care about your clients and athletes, because they will pick up if you don't. So I think they're my two biggest tips: is show via social media in terms of what you stand for, what you believe in, your passion. And the second thing is that you actually really do care. That's a big one.
Fantastic, mate. Thanks so much for jumping on and sharing, as well as Chris as well, mate. Good luck with the internship. No doubt you'll get big things. And it sounds like you've got a step up for him when he comes back. Is that right? There's the development plan in place.
Yeah, he'll be going full time. So when he comes back, he'll be full time at Woodford. So hopefully he can just take my role, and I can just go into the sunset and do what I really want to do, which is go to America and just keep going with those big guys in America. That's where I believe I want to go. I know I'm going to get there. Just got to keep moving forward. So I'm going to find someone to take over my role, and he's the man. So brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Very good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, Woody.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Director of West Coast Health and High Performance, located in Perth. Chris Perkin is going to discuss how to best combine technology to assist with injury prevention and high performance. Welcome, Chris. I'm sure I unmuted you. Hold on, Chris, hold on. From my end, you're unmuted, but maybe the headphones might have slipped out. No. It was working off air, so it was good before. How's that? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. I'll bring Durham on, and then that will give you 10 minutes or so. So Durham, we'll jump you up the list, mate. And Chris will bring you back on after Durham. So next up, we have founder of Core Advantage, located in Melbourne. Durham McInnes will be discussing increasing your surface area for luck. Welcome, Durham, and thanks for jumping on, mate. No sound as well. There we go.
Can you hear me now? We good?
I'm good.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed, for having me. Great to be part of such a crew. So I have been incredibly lucky in my career. There's been so many near misses where Core Advantage couldn't have existed. I think before you even talk about luck, you have to talk a little bit about survivor bias, because the reason we're all here on this panel is because our businesses didn't die, and there's about 5 different times mine cut off. So I think it's important to, for people thinking about starting a business, you only hear the success stories mostly. So sometimes there is just luck that plays into keeping a business alive. We had a nasty situation about 2.5 years into the business where if we hadn't been given an overdraft by the bank, I'd probably be off doing something completely different at this point in time. So I think, and I know quite a few of the guys' stories here, and there's often an important stroke of luck that comes into it. But I do think you can increase your surface area for luck. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Do you want me to just rattle on about it, Jack, or you got questions?
Yeah, let's. I'm intrigued. I think I know where you're coming from, but yeah, just for those listening,
Sure. Okay.
Talk us through from an athlete's perspective, and then also from a business point of view, what are some ways that you can increase your surface area?
So from an athlete's point of view, it's being, if you're a coachable athlete, if you're ready to go, if you're receptive to feedback, if you're putting in that extra work, an opportunity is going to come along, and you can just, someone, can go down with an injury and you can step into their spot, do amazingly, and perhaps more importantly, you can, as an athlete, attract really good mentors that are going to know that investing their time and effort in you really pays off. So I think it's massive. Those coachable athletes, whether it's conscious or subconscious, there's just certain people as coaches you want to give more to. Those athletes, you just want to help. And so I think that's, from an athlete point of view, that's just making it your best abilities, your availability. So it's having that durable, robust body, but also just having that fact that you're enjoyable to coach because you put the hard work in, and it's not just sort of pissing your time away. It's a really worthwhile thing. So that's from an athlete point of view. And from a business and a coach point of view, I sort of think of it, there's a couple of times of luck. There's what luck, which is just a little bit random. So what luck, for instance, we 500 meters or 800 meters up the road from our gym, they're building a brand new grass athletics track. They've ripped up the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
They're laying down perfect irrigation, sprinklers, and grass athletics. And they did that about a month after we decided we were going to start doing rehab for running stuff. And we're just like, oh, where can we go? That's just extraordinary. What luck. That's just really, really good random luck. But there's also who luck. And who luck is the people in your life that can make a huge difference to your life. And I think you can't influence what luck much, but you can massively change who luck in your favor. And so for me, the most obvious example is probably my business partner, Jacob Tober, VBT coach on Instagram. Jacob had finished his internship at Oakley Chargers and had actually no real need to do an internship with me at all. But a mutual friend knew that we'd get along like a house on fire because of our sort of shared passion and ambitions, put us together. And that piece of who luck ended up being absolutely massive for me in my life because he's great at all the things I suck at. I'm great at all the things he sucks at. So there's a really good element there. But you follow that chain through, and that ends up leading to a whole bunch of other really good events for us as a business. We wouldn't be nearly as well known if it wasn't for the early work he put in with his vlogging for a long time. And now we're on the cusp of launching our Metric VBT, a VBT app, which never in a million years would I have dreamt up. I'm just the guy saying, yes, you should hire your brother. He's really smart. Go do that. But so that who luck, I reckon, is huge. And the thing is, there are ways you can cultivate it. And so I think there's fundamentally just a couple of things that you can do that make a really big difference. The first is knowing your weaknesses. My ingoing position was, I know I'm as bad at a whole bunch of things as I am good at things. I really suck at quite a few different things. I've got major weaknesses. So knowing that, I was always really hungry to build a team around me that was better than me. So I think that's a good starting position rather than thinking, you know everything. Having a good vision. When I talked about what I wanted to do, I wanted to democratize high performance for the private sector, which, at that point in time, hadn't really been sort of pushed much. And Woody was getting started, and he was making a lot of waves and a lot of noise, but apart from him, it was pretty quiet down here. And then I think there's an element, so you've got to have that vision, an element of generosity of spirit. So just being a good kind of citizen in the space, and being positive, and just people will tend to want to help you if you're the kind of person that's nice to them, even if you don't need them. And I don't always succeed at that. Like, sometimes in frustration you do the wrong thing, but I think if you do that, and particularly, and then passion, like you've got to, and whether the passion is loud and outspoken, or whether it's the passion's expressed through attention to detail, I'm not sure it matters, but that passion to actually do really good stuff. And so, I found time and time again that combo of things has been really, really helpful. And so, Jacob was a good example of that. But another classic one was Jack when I first met you. So Brit Smart dragged you down to our gym to say hi, because she knew you and I would get along. And you mentioned the I'm not sure what it was called then, but it's now the Melbourne Athletic Development Coaches Network. And I didn't know about it. I was like, what are you talking about? I've never even heard of this thing. And you were like, yeah, I'll get you on. And I found out about this great event where where James Russell was hosting events, bringing the community together. And I reached out to him and said, hey, anytime you ever want to do an event, feel free to do it at my place. We'd love to have you there. And I did it because he was just doing a great thing, and I wanted to find a way to support that. And that was great. And that ended up, we had Brett Bartholomew come and present at our place, which was really cool. And that was great. But then that also directly was a key lead into us forming a partnership with Iron Edge, which was a really huge thing for our business. And so some people go, oh my God, you guys are so lucky. And it's like, yeah, we were really lucky. And I certainly didn't chase any outcome from that, but I just wanted to be part of something that I thought was really cool. And so there's that sort of generosity element to it as well. And I reckon the last piece, though, is, the passion element. And, like Lockie has done an incredible job with his plyometric continuum. Like, he's really stamped his authority on that concept, because people look at that and the intellectual rigor that's gone into it. They're like, if his plyometric continuum is that good, how good must everything else be as well? Like, I think there's a real credibility marker you do with that. And I sort of did a much lamer version of that with our warm-up. So I got a gig in 2006 with the Australian Sapphires, and I felt very insecure about getting this gig over a couple of AIS coaches that probably were more deserving of the role. And I said, I want to make the best warm-up in the world. When we go away to the World Championships, I want the best warm-up in the world. And so I put a truckload of work into a simple thing like a warm-up, but that still pays dividends to this day, because people see that, and that's a signal. It's a signifier of your work that you do. And then that generates more luck for you as well. So I think you put those things together, and you'd be surprised the sort of compound interest on those things collectively.
Yeah, mate, that's
sorry about the monologue. That was a bit much. Wasn't it?
No, it was good. I was captivated. I even forgot that I was hosting something for a second there, but that was that did ring a bell. That I do remember Brittany Smart bringing me down and seeing your facility, and just being able to meet you and seeing what was going on, which at that time I hadn't been in a space that was doing that. So it did open up my eyes. And it's funny now. Yeah, James has passed the baton over to Mike Crichton, who's chatting on a little bit later on. It's just funny how these things do work. But like you mentioned, let's unpack the self-awareness aspect of it first. And I like how you broke down passion as well, because I think that ties in with what Woody was talking about, being authentic and not trying to be something you're not. And you mentioned that you can be passionate. Doesn't need to be loud. Can I just
say, Woody's so lucky that his authentic self is such an attention-grabbing authentic, because I'm my authentic self, but I'm just a little bit dull and sort of like, you can see it from both points of view. Like that's not getting any play. I love how Woody's authentic approach is also really captivating. I think it's great. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so self-awareness and knowing your weaknesses and your strengths. What are some activities or some processes, I guess, for coaches and athletes to develop that area?
I think one of the most important things, and it came to me later in life than it should have, was trying to cultivate an awareness of what the me experience is for other people. Because so often, we're going around our life and we just experience what's coming in at us and how the situation is, whereas really having a thought of, okay, what's the me experience going to be like for other people? And so, for instance, I'm pretty relaxed about me because I'm not worried about me judging me, because I'm pretty secure and chill. But interns coming into our place, were fucking terrified of me. Like people, we had an intern once. I was talking about it today with our team. Athletes Authority did the thing where they have the interns present at the end of their internship, which is a great idea. We did that too. And we had one that had a panic attack that was so bad that she went blind. Like she couldn't see. Like she literally lost visual because she was so stressed about doing this great presentation. Like we had a really intimidating environment early on because I thought they had to be perfect. And it took me much longer than it should have to go, actually, I'm freaking people out a bit. I should be a bit more relaxed and allow them more room to make mistakes. So that self-awareness of and Jacob too, like he's fully intimidating because he's crazy smart. And he took him a while to realize that he wasn't getting the best out of people because they were above that sort of peak arousal curve. Like they were the wrong spot of that to actually perform. So yeah, I think that's step one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you mentioned passion, and let's delve into that a little bit more. So for those that are listening in and want to be passionate and showcase that in social media to build a brand or in their coaching for athlete rapport, whatever the purpose is, what are some ways that you worked out early on in your career that recognize, am I going to be a loud coach? Am I going to be, attention to detail and obviously the other areas that come
firstly, whatever you do, just do the exact opposite to what I do in social, because my social's weak as. But I think for me, I get very excited about the kind of the compounding effect of 1%. It's about doing these things where when you start to add them together, people's athletic ability gets better and better. So getting the details in place so you can really get them faster, stronger, better. And what I think I'm good at is conveying my excitement around the future potential of the work they're putting in now. Like if someone nails their trap bar deadlift, I'm really excited because I'm like, if we just keep going down this path, you are going to get really, really good. So I think, and I'm from a background as a lot of arts degrees in my family and a lot of teachers, and I enjoy telling stories. So I'll tell someone the story of if you put a gun to my head and you said, you're stealing my entire gym, but I can only keep one piece of equipment, that's going to be the trap bar. I love it. It's awesome. Here's why. It's going to make you run fast, jump high, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm as passionate about selling the thing via a story as I'm about doing it. And I think that helps too, because your athletes, you don't have to rev them up each week because you've kind of incepted them with why they should love being good at this thing. And I enjoy that as much as I enjoy the coaching. It's the influence on them to have them be as hungry for excellence on their trap bar deadlift as I am.
Yeah, because they're probably not going to nerd out about a trap bar deadlift the same as us or the panel. But hearing that they're going to jump higher and run faster, they probably will. So it makes a lot of sense. What about from a like you mentioned with COVID, hard times, and how important it is to put in the work early to sort of set yourself up for success and increase your luck is the topic. So, yeah, what you mentioned, good values and knowing how to do good work, and that will sort of set yourself up wherever it leads you. You won't necessarily know, but good things will come through that. Is that something that you've sort of had ingrained in you growing up? Is that something a mentor has helped you develop over time and you've trusted that concept and then now you're starting to see that it has paid off? Or is it something you knew early on?
I wish it was as considered. Realistically, what it was I'm a recovering perfectionist. Like I actually had problematic kind of OCD level perfectionism streak that I had to really kind of bash out. Like I had to get rid of that. And so it was just like I would have trouble going half into a task. So when I was at the Dandenong Rangers in the WNBL, Women's National Basketball League, I was getting paid $12K a year to do that gig in 2003. And I was probably putting in $100,000 worth of my time because I just couldn't half-ass it. And that wasn't some grand strategy. That wasn't some noble thing. It was just like, it would just drive me crazy to not do it properly. And it's only, like I'm 48 now. It's only with probably in my mid 40s that I actually learned being a perfectionist was crippling our progress as a business. So it wasn't I think it was just a bit of, in the same way that, you know, Woody loves getting into a fight or an argument, or, you know, getting up and around. Like, that's not a cultivated thing. That's just kind of who he is. My sort of OCD tendencies were who I was. But now I'm definitely chasing being an awesomist rather than a perfectionist. But fundamentally, a perfectionist is a stupid strategy because you never get anything done. And so my brother's our CEO, and he yells at me about it, and Jacob yells at me about it a bit as well, and that keeps me in line.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you for jumping on and sharing your wisdom with us in terms of, like Woody mentioned, you were the first one that we seem to be aware of at this stage anyway, doing it I was grew up in Balaclava, so fully aware of what was it?
Good old Body World.
Body World. Yeah, the most old school looking gym you'll ever see.
It was awesome.
You were
great
doing
first
it.
time.
Yeah. But yeah, talk us through, for athletes listening to the podcast as well as coaches, what is a way to get in contact, as well as how do you work with Core Advantage?
So coreadvantage.com.au, it's got all our info around training with us, and you can follow me at Durham.McInnes, MCINNIS, and core_advantage is our account. At least equally interesting, in fact, much more interesting, is Jacob's account at VBT Coach. He's putting out some great stuff that is really doing great with it.
Yeah, I'm loving your app as well, guys. It's great.
Awesome, thank you.
Out the phone and get the boys getting competitive with their velocity-based training. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. Thanks heaps for having me, Jack. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Durham. Chris, we're going to try round 2. Can I hear? Oh no, it's not working. Potentially. Just the other things that could be happening, because it's the volume's on from my end, so it might be that is it maybe Bluetooth, something connected to Bluetooth?
Hey, Jack, just quickly, I found that the private chat window was obscuring where I had my button muted. So maybe if you get through the private chat window, you can see there's actually a little mute button that might be.
Well done.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Genius. Oh. There's some smart blokes in the room, isn't there?
Durham. Got it done. There you go.
Hey, mate, that's the best thing I've had happen all day.
Oh, huge. Yeah, I was trying to scratch my head, but Durham got us there. You beauty.
Thanks, all right, clearly I'm an old bloke like Durham and a bit dodgy on the social media.
Yeah, the things we could do this group together, hey? We'll take on the world, the Aussies.
Thanks, mate.
All right, round 2. Here we go. So, Director of West Coast Health and High Performance, located in Perth, Chris Perkin. His topic is going to be how to best combine technology to assist with injury prevention and ultimately high performance. Welcome, Chris.
Yes, thanks, Jack, and thanks, crew. Second time lucky. Hey, I appreciate being on. It's good to hear everyone with the passion they've got for what they do. Really enjoying it.
100%, mate. Well, let's dive right in. What technology do you find most effective for assessing symmetry?
Yeah, I guess coming from a background, we've all come from sports teams backgrounds and taking that into the private world. I guess we're lucky where we go with the teams that they've got the affordability of everything, and we're well using the technology they can afford. Our high performance centre is lucky to have ECU Uni linked with it and actually at the Eagles Centre, so available to the public. So we've got things like DEXA scan, the VO2 Max machine for running, the Biodex machine. And privately got our force plates. So there's a whole bunch of things I think we can use, and it just depends on what you've got access to. And what I love is trying to figure out, how accessible this is. We can help other clinics get this information, take it back to their own sort of workouts, and then use it, and then follow it later and see how much improvement there is. But look, I guess force platforms are probably more accessible for the high performance centres, and I reckon the force platforms are a great way of measuring, a number of things, a whole bunch of things, and which type you have doesn't really matter. But giving you dynamic stuff with jumping, hopping, counter jump movement, drop jumps, those type of things. Looking at the peak power you can get out of that, but also the rate of force development. Hearing a big important part of speed being a big injury prevention and performance. How can we improve on speed on some of the athletes that have made coming back from injuries that are almost there, but their rate of force development isn't quite there on one leg, or their push-off's not there on one leg. You can pick that up very nicely on some of the force platform stuff. And then it makes the rehab process just a little bit more structured and achievable. And then, okay, we'll remeasure this
rate of force development after these hop drills or these spring drills or these plyo drills. And then whack, 2 weeks later, you've got this, 30% improvement that they see on screen. And that gives everyone a bit of energy. Or if you haven't changed, then we need to sort out our shit and actually get a better program together. So that's, I suppose, putting us all to accountability. So force plates are certainly one of those things. The DEXA scan we use, there's a bit of research in AFL that if you've got a percentage body fat of less than 12%, and this is just coming out through one of the PhD guys at the clinic, if you're less than 12%, actually you're probably 3 times more likely, this is the stat he gave me, to miss 2 or more games of injury compared to if you're less than 12%. So if you're more than 12%, you're more likely to get injured and miss 2 or more games. There you go. That's the stat to remember.
How's that?
So that's a high level performance. I mean, everyone's going to come outside of those, that bell curve, but that's a number that Callum, who's doing his PhD at the moment, had a chat with me about, sports science fella.
What athletes was part of the study?
Well, this is the West Coast Eagles squad, so he's sort of doing using that and bone density measures to look at performance over the last couple of years, or injury over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
performance probably wouldn't be a good one at the moment. So you've got your measurement tools there on the force plates. You've got the DEXA scan, the dynamometers, which obviously we all use in the clinic and in the physio clinics. Are great measures to look at anything you want to look at. So hamstrings are big number 1 AFL injury. So from an injury prevention point of view, hammies, of course, we've got the Nord board, if you're lucky enough to have one of those. A lot of clubs have them, but otherwise we've got your isometric hammy. You can do in any range using a dynamometer, and they're really accessible. Some of them are pretty cheap now. You can get them for $300 or $400 for some of the cheaper ones. We use the Axit system, which is great. The Eagles use the Veld system. All you boys are familiar with all of that stuff, but it's a great way of accountability and measuring. When you think something's weak and you're assessing it, but then all of a sudden you've got a 40% deficit on a number, it makes a big difference on then on putting a program together and measuring that and remeasuring, and that's always important in the concept of getting the performance side of things going, linked with injury, or even not with injury. As a injury prevention, if you've got a 40% deficit on a dynamometer, then on a hammy or a quad or an abductor, then we know that can link with injury. Certainly not prevent it, but can link with it.
Yeah.
So on top of that, Jack, I guess the Biodex is something that again we use for some research, and we picked up a 40% deficit in a hamstring the other day. A guy that's trying to aspire to be an AFL player. He's out of year 12, trying to get into a pick next year. So did a full screen on him with things, and the Biodex picked up a 40% difference. It's not going to prevent injury, but it's going to reduce his risk for injury. We know the prevention of things is a little bit difficult, but we try and reduce as much risk as we can. And I guess that's why everyone here is about strength, conditioning, performance. That's what we're doing. We're reducing injury risk every time we're getting the people to max strength or max speed and sprint work. We're trying to prevent injury, but it's more reducing risk, I guess, and preparing like a pro is what you're doing. That'll reduce the risk.
You mentioned a non-professional athlete that you're working with. From a buy-in perspective, when you do have the luxury of tech, I can imagine that young athlete, when they saw that gap, or however you explain to the athlete there's a bit of a deficit here, would be pretty motivated to make a change when they're seeing that objective measure. How important do you think that is if you do have the ability to use tech, but also how important is it your communication with the athlete when there is a fair gap?
Yeah, 100%. I guess the communication is the key, and the reassurance that we can make a change. I mean, that's why we're all in the business we're in, because we know we can have an impact. And if you have the energy that you've got from Woody there, as shown very clearly, you're going to inspire people to actually work. So you have to actually put them in that environment where it's a bit more. You're not just coming to the normal gym. You're here to work your ass off to get a result. Otherwise, why are you here? So if he says a deficit, they're driven enough to do a screen like this. They're going to work at it. But at the same time, the other funny thing is in the sport we play, you've got to be able to be a good footy player, a good rugby player too. So we can get them all up to these levels and give them their best opportunity. But then that's where all these performance side of things, we need to get the skill set and link in coaches and mentors in that aspect that can help them become a better, skills and athlete of the sport they're doing, in particular AFL. Because, I mean, a lot of the recruiters will look at, okay, how, as opposed to looking at their time trial, their strength or their squat, they'll be looking at how they play.
Yeah, of course.
Week, but the performance level, give yourself your best opportunity to go to that next level. This is why you're doing what we're doing, and work hard on it, and producing some KPIs for them to work on. So, the other one, the speed side of things, I'm interested to see how the guys get the speed or the running speed into these athletes in the clinic, because we've got a Woodway treadmill. We're going lucky enough to have this, which gives us force plate. It has a force plate inbuilt. It's got a horizontal and vertical forces, stride length. You're getting stride rate, and these aspects give a great number, a total asymmetry number on. Okay, what's the difference there? And the big picture is the problem solving, from my point of view, is niggles or performance is how does it all relate and mix together? Because you can get all the different technologies you like, but it's then putting it together and probably, like one of the lads said before, sitting down with the athlete, how are you going to actually put that together now? We've found that with your school program or your uni program or your club sport, and where can we diarise this into your program? And they might have to cut something out, but we need to put X, Y, or Z into your program. And this is a challenge. I think that's one of the big challenges on that.
And for the athletes that you're working, the non-professional athletes, how does that look? Is that a weekly membership? Do they pay for a consultation with yourself to get this screening? Talk us through it.
Yeah. Well, we've looked at a lot of the websites you guys run, and we haven't got as many coaches, but it's more of a physio-based clinic turning into the performance aspect. So that's where we're going now. We've got a couple of sports science guys working hard, and developing that energy in the coaches. I think energy is early, and care that you want to actually do the right thing. So we're at that stage now. No memberships, just we're doing a lot of performance assessments for other groups. So whether it be Western Force, another club, ultimately the facility's there for the Eagles to do, so they don't have to travel too far to have all their testing done. But it's for the public. So, the other sporting teams in Perth will come along and test an ACL client. It's 12 months down the track, from the Western Force, who's coming back, ticking a box on Biodex, ticking a box on your muscle size. You can see on a DEXA if there's a deficiency still. Most of these groups have got force plates to check, but I guess that's what we're trying to use. As much of the technology that exists to complement all those other aspects of training and plyometrics and return to speed and volume and the running they've done. So getting ticking all the boxes on this return to play sort of aspect when they are injured, or just if it's a performance point of view, trying to reduce the injury risk as much as possible and get that top level. So you are sprinting and you are working at your max, whether you be doing the running, the gym, whatever it might be there, and you've got your elite strength that matches that AFL level. So giving kids and people that something to aspire to, I think, makes them work harder. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And you won't be, when the time's right, you won't be hard to find strength and conditioning coaches that want to work in your facility, I'm sure. With the ACL athlete there, how often would you see him? How often would he come in for assessment?
Yeah, well, the surgeons probably like to do we have a couple of surgeons working with us. They like to do a 3, 6, and 9 months, and obviously you're not doing too much max stuff at three months. I actually like to use the force plates really early in the stages when they're actually starting to weight bear properly, so they're normalising their gait, normalising their feeling of squat and weight bearing, and using the floss bands or the actual air bands with the blood flow restriction stuff early. And again, the strength and conditioning world has been using that for quite a while, and we're just getting more and more evidence to support it. So, force plates early in the piece, I reckon, to get activation. With our ACL patients, the highest risk is not buggering the ACL; it's popping their hammy when you're doing the strength testing. Which I had a younger physio in the other day who we did a dynamometry test on his hammy at 45 degrees knee flexion, and we felt a little pop. So, we both worked together and said, well, there it goes. There's your little bit of a restrain of your grafted hamstring. ACL is good, but, so you've got to be careful where you put these strength measures in. So, and that's why it's a graduated process of measuring that over time. But so 3, 6, and 8, 12 months. 12 months is a big one for the clubs and the surgeons and athletes. If not 6 months, because some of our athletes we want to push back earlier. The evidence is mixed where you bring them back, but if we can tick as many boxes as we can at 8, 9, 10 months and show the athlete as much information as we can that they've ticked the box, they're within 10% of the other side or they're better than the other side, it gives them confidence, and confidence and reassurance in an athlete is probably worth more than some of the other factors we see. They have to be confident and go into training comps and push themselves to speed. And, we've got technology to measure GPS. We've got all those factors, but the confidence is really important. And I guess all this technology ticks those boxes for them as well. I'm hoping if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, like you said, if you've got all these objective measures, no doubt, if they're in favour of the athlete coming from a long-term injury, it's only going to boost your confidence, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess it never takes away a clinical side of things from us as physios. That you've got a good musculoskeletal screen, you're looking at where the imbalances are. You might be able to leg press 200, but you can't do a side clam or work your hip external rotators. Yep. And sometimes we see that as, not a massive factor, but combined with good strength, you do need those sort of details of, hip rotator weakness that we can measure on dynamometers as well. So I reckon, all those little things add up to be a pro. I guess you're trying to tick all those boxes and have those things to go. So, hopefully that makes sense.
It sure does, mate. Thank you for jumping on, Chris. And for those that are listening in, practitioners, physios, sports scientists, like you mentioned, and strength and conditioning coaches in the future, as well as, of course, athletes that want to be assessed in your facility and treated by yourself, where's the best place to get in contact?
Yeah, well, clearly not as good on socials or on the technology on the computer, but West Coast website, West Coast Health and High Performance, and Instagram's pretty good on West Coast Health _HP. But you look up names anywhere and you'll find people. So love to get anyone in there and help them get to the point they want to get to, and love the passion everyone's showing what they're doing. So thanks for having us on, mate.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Chris. Absolute pleasure, mate.
Yeah, that's been great. I'll listen to the chat soon.
Next, we have Michael Crichton, the co-owner of Melbourne Fitness and Performance, located in Footscray, Melbourne. His topic will be junior athlete development. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Jack. Great to be here, mate.
There we go. Straight off the bat, some volume. That's what we like.
We got it going.
Awesome, mate. Apologies for the listeners. This is a new platform. I'm normally using Zoom, so we're getting there. Let's dive in, mate. Talk us through, starting with parents, tips for parents of junior athletes. What are some important things to take into account?
Yeah, it's a good one, and it's one that you always have to think about when you're running like a facility like ours. Right? You get a lot of kids that come in from the young age of 9 years old, and they're going to be with you all the way up until they become professional or semi-pro or move on from here to bigger organizations overseas, wherever it may be. So establishing relationships with parents and sort of collaborating with them in terms of developing that team ethos from the start is really important. So we like to make sure that they're integrated into everything that we're trying to achieve with the coaching and training at the facility that carries over into what they can assist the athlete with at home. I think parents obviously play a big role, because without them, the kids aren't going to be able to chase the goal of becoming an athlete. The routine that they help them set up, the structure they place, and the people that they get to help develop them as athletes is critical. So we always like to sort of like bridge the gap. Something that we've done recently is we teamed up with the Sporting Parent, and we actually started to use that network, and we ran an event and a night where we used our network to sort of allow parents to try and learn about what it's like to be a parent. So we wish we had all the answers as S&C coaches, but we know that there's people that specialize in that. So if you haven't heard of that book, look out for it by Nathan Parnham. It's a great book. I know a few others here push it as well. And it's something that will help parents understand what it is that athletes or junior athletes are going through, because it's a big time in their life and not all of them make it. So, and that's okay. It's very competitive in the sporting world these days. But what we know that happens from, developing these routines, relationships, and healthy lifestyle, training, and so forth, is the confidence factor, which I think carries over into whatever it is you do in your career, regardless of whatever it is. You may go into an office job, you may stay in the sports industry, you may become a coach. But I believe that what you develop in the team environment and training hard as a junior athlete will help you with whatever it is you choose to do in the future. So it is important for parents to understand that they are the role model at home, away from the places where they take their kids to learn about the sports, to train, and to connect with professionals like what we do here at MFP, and to make sure that they actually play part of the role. And it's hard because a lot of parents invest the money into the children and the time and effort into them, and then don't save any time, effort, or money for themselves. I'm a big firm believer that they need to lead by example and actually have and help develop these healthy relationships when it comes to everything that we do to build athletes.
Oh, that's amazing, mate. Thanks for sharing an insight on behind the scenes, as well as internally how you guys manage it through education, like you mentioned with the Sporting Parent, the book, but also through getting the parents involved and how important it is to lead through actions. I love that concept. For the parents listening in, what would be, I guess, some actionable things that you could start with in that space? What do you think from a role model point of view for your child?
Yeah, having a healthy relationship with exercise and nutrition as well. So, they're trying to enforce on their kids, oh, you've got to go do all your training, you've got to go to sleep, you've got to eat well and things. But actually having a healthy relationship with yourself will help with your child as they're developing, because monkey see, monkey do. They learn from their environment they're in, and it can go a long way to helping them establish the off the field behaviors, which obviously has a big impact on success with athletes, because we know it's the total package. And the more competitive sport's getting, the more important it is to establish the off the field behaviors early in the child's development. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it just means you have to be aware, be prepared, and then obviously take some time to learn how you can assist all the things that are associated with helping an athlete develop. Because at the end of the day, we don't just want to create athletes, we want to create good people in the community. So that's a big part of why we do this. And that comes back to that team culture community that we create at our facilities to instill those good beliefs and behaviors that carry over into you as a person.
And for the coaches listening and facility owners, it is a touchy one, obviously, managing parents of the kids that you're training. And like you said, it's a big sacrifice. They're driving long distances and paying good money for their kids. But how do you go? Has your experience working with parents in this form been over the years?
Yeah, I think in the private industry, we're quite lucky because it's a choice. Parents can choose to come here. It's not just the local sports team down the road that they have to go to because it's close by and so forth. They kind of have a choice to go to facilities like the high performance facilities that we're seeing these days. So if you create rapport, relationships, and develop that sort of it's more than just a coach. You actually start to become a friend, someone who they can ask questions that they need answers to. Like everyone here, probably sitting here, I think we're the only industry in the world, in the service industry, where it's face-to-face work, where people feel comfortable messaging you after 9 p.m. randomly for checking in with a session, asking a question about this, confiding in you about something. There's something wrong with my kid. Can you help? So I think actually being aware of that and developing the relationship with the parent and the athlete, that is a bit more than just I'm your coach and that's it, like the local sports team down the road. Something that we find is critical to the growth of our facility.
And what about for the coaches, mate? I know you've got a lot of great coaches underneath you.
Yeah, I don't recommend that parents message the coaches after 9 often, though, please.
That's what aeroplane mode is for the phone, hey?
Absolutely. No, of course. But sometimes, you just got to do what you got to do. That's the difference, I guess, with running facilities like this. It's not a institute of sport where they're chosen. It's a place where they're paying to be and choosing to go to. In terms of like coaches, I think when it comes to coaches, it's really about building connection, and don't be afraid to build connection with young athletes. That is sort of like more of a friend coach role as well, because that will help you to learn more about the person that you're working with and not just the athlete and the sport that you're dealing with. And I think that will then help you later, because at the end of the day, this is a business that needs to be successful, and it is driven by successful revenue streams. If I can keep an athlete from the age of 9 through the entirety of their career, the amount of money that they spend with me is exponential, and the success of my company. If I can also create that relationship and culture that they feel a part of something that's greater than just somewhere where they go for exercise, they're going to tell their friends, who will tell their friends, who will then tell their friends, and we start to increase our network and opportunity for growth as a facility. Because at the end of the day, we all want these amazing facilities that cost a lot of money, but we need to be able to establish that there is some need to really connect and communicate with people, because connection is a big thing of what humans are about. And even junior athletes want to feel connected, want to feel a part of it. That's what brings them back. So a big thing we have here is, it doesn't matter who you train with, it's a team environment. I can be walking around the gym training. I'll talk to everyone's clients. I know stuff about them, and everyone will connect in that culture. The other one with coaches is you've got to be, you've got to be open to everything, and you have to be open-minded. It's very hard to be one-way focused and to only have one mindset when it comes to people and behaviors in the industry, because in the private industry, you're going to be confronted with every scenario you can think of. And obviously that's going to be critical to the success of your facility, of how you can deal with all the scenarios that you face.
Obviously, it's a huge topic, junior athlete development, but from a physical point of view, what are some key pillars that you guys pride yourself on in terms of athletes that train in your facility?
Yeah, good. I just put down here, skills pay the bills. And when it comes to junior athlete development, we really want to integrate skills into every training session. And we feel that it's a big part of the overall development pathways of fine motor skills that carry over into performance-based athlete training, which is something that sort of we want to layer later. It doesn't mean that we're not trying to improve their speed, their jump height, or their jump, how far they can jump. It just means that we want to make sure that we're layering skill development as well. So jumping, landing, sprinting, change of direction, gymnastics, movement enhancement, injury resilience. It's the word we have shifted to as well. Like Chris was saying, we tend to not say prevention, because you can't prevent everything, but we like to make people as resilient as they can be. And always something like you always want to have some sort of challenge or something they can strive towards as well, because we want to start creating the mindset that at some point in their junior athlete career, they're going to have to flip the switch. Am I just participating, or am I actually trying to win? And when that matters is different for each sport, and obviously development, the maturation of the athlete that you have. So it's critical to sort of start to embrace that in the gym-based culture with the things that you are layering in their training, and not be afraid to test junior athletes as well.
Oh, fantastic, mate. Thanks so much for jumping on, Mike, and presenting on junior athlete development. It's a huge area that in Australia we're doing great things. So thank you for jumping on and sharing your experiences in the field as well as knowledge, mate. So for those that want to train in your facility, what's the best place to get in contact?
Yeah, teammfp.com.au is our website, and you can catch us on Instagram at MelbFitPerformance or CoachMike_MFP. Or you can follow any one of our team, because at the moment they're all absolutely producing amazing content in social media.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike.
Cheers, mate.
Next, we have Tim Schleiger, the Director of the Sports Clinic of Melbourne. He is located in Paran. His topic is discussing the key to strong working relationships between physiotherapists and strength and conditioning coaches. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Jack. First and foremost, well done on getting the group together. Like, you've done a terrific job in pulling together a group of guys in a pretty short period of time. So well done.
Nah, thanks, mate. I'm absolutely loving the panel that we have and just hosting this event, mate. It's working a treat, and no doubt the ones that are tuned in, we've still got 30 listeners that have listened through the whole way. So well done to you guys, and thanks to the whole panel for jumping on, mate. But we'll jump in, folks.
Well, it's good. It's good to have Woody back, because it looks like he was starting to atrophy a bit. So he's obviously got some nutrition on board there to. Bravo, well done. So, look, I also come in with another side tonight quickly, Jack, and that's just to say, for those of you that were part of the Victorian shit show the last couple of years, it brings me a lot of joy just to see everyone back, obviously after the role that Tony Doherty and I and a few others played, going from gym owners and physio clinic owners to all of a sudden becoming gym lobbyists and political activists and doing negotiations with government. It's just so good to see how an underappreciated industry has come back to life. I know there's a range of outcomes in terms of some gyms have gone particularly well, some haven't, but it's great to see you guys who are passionate about the industry back on track. I know that Woody tends to call me Dad a lot, so I do sort of feel a little bit like the old bloke here who's, when I hear about, experiences from the, the mid-2000s, I'm thinking, geez, I was already, 15 years into it at that point. But it's just so good to see a great group here. So well done to all of you that you're back and you're open and you're going well.
Mate, the Don, hey, you saved us. You kept us batting. Now, appreciate your work, Tim, and I was lucky enough to get in contact with you through a local colleague, and I know as soon as whispers were happening, you were the first man to get on the call, and you did a great job of keeping us in the loop with everyone working in gyms. So I really appreciate your work.
No, thanks, Jack.
We'll get into the topic, mate. Tips. We'll start with tips for strength and conditioning coaches that are listening in that have had a struggle in the workplace to connect or get on the same page with their medical teammates.
Well, I think so. When we started this sort of movement in, it was 1995. So ESSA hadn't been sort of invented at that time, and we took in the first ever exercise physiologist graduates. And there was nowhere else for an exercise physiologist to go except for our business, because of the relationships we created with orthopedic surgeons that were forward thinking about going, look, and when I say this, Chris, because we've got physios and S&Cs and everyone on board, it was just that thing of just going, sometimes the minute stuff around just spending too much time doing a clam and doing all that sort of stuff wasn't relevant, and just firing up a good old glute max and having a femoral head sit better in a hip joint around a whole host of things. There was components that we were able to offer at the time as an S&C based business with physios in it, which were driven from an S&C, but someone that was very passionate about movement training and sports specific training, etc. As a an NSL soccer player that had failed through what was OP at the time, but it was the old inguinal hernias. I felt really passionate about bringing in all sorts of things. We through Bowden Babchek, and we brought yoga in 1996, and all these different things that are now commonplace. And as you know, Jack, you've had the history lesson from me about where everything comes from. But I think the key component is, I use a saying a lot, and I say, seek first to understand where someone comes from. So I think the beauty of what we're talking about today is we've got these really wonderful strength and conditioning coaches who have such amazing strengths. And then, like in our clinic, we've got, 5 or 6 of those, and then who are working in AFL systems and so forth. And then we've also got, 7 or 8 physiotherapists as well. And the soft cap's been good to us, where we've been able to pinch a couple of guys that, with young families haven't perhaps been able to, commit to a football club on that level. And so then it's enabled us to sort of talk about that Venn diagram where, if we understand where the strength and conditioning coach is coming from, and if we understand where the physiotherapist is coming from, we know that from an S&C component that a physiotherapist is probably going to be more often than not conservative with some things. And we know that probably traditionally the S&C person, without perhaps the injury history component in where their trainings come from, is possibly going to be trying to push the envelope. Then you've got your sports med docs, your high performance coaches, and also we look at the dynamic, and especially we've certainly seen that in the last 5 years, is everyone's trying to look after their job in the high performance environment. And so it can, if the club's doing well, then fantastic. But if the club's struggling, then obviously that can become somewhat of a shit show. So we're in private practice now. So by developing relationships, by understanding whether it's within the clinic, I think that Venn diagram, rather than there only being a small meeting point, what I like to talk about is that Venn diagram meeting point becomes bigger. Because how wonderful, I know with the physios in my clinic, if Chris could know, I don't have to fill in the gaps with this S&C because he's across all that sort of stuff. He's not only done his masters, he's a good programmer, but because Chris knows that S&C is in his locker, he spent a bit of time, and he knows that he's going to get a relevant activation program, relevant for that person, whether it's firing up a QF or getting a glute med going or whatever the case is, in order to get a glute max hip hinge movement done properly and efficiently, maybe with the Myo who's done a psoas release earlier. If Chris knows that's being done, then he can get on with more important stuff too. And so I think the physio needs to strive to also try and find more S&Cs who can fill the middle of that Venn diagram, but also the same way the S&Cs need to go, well, it's one thing to meet out and reach out to a physiotherapist from private practice, but also go and spend some time. As each of you I think have talked about tonight, where you've said, don't be cagey with your information. 28 years in, anyone I've seen who's been cagey with their desire to share knowledge over time isn't still in the industry, or they got tired of it. And I think the one thing we haven't touched on, which I think Durham, you touched on it a little bit, and I think Jared as well, is like you're trying to fit those little minuscule bits into an already overloaded week. Through communication, you can start to understand it. And certainly for me in my life, I find that, working in performance sport, when you've treated and got through their careers, the guys that are now the coaches, and the high performance coaches have worked for you when they were young, life's pretty easy. You can go about your work with confidence, knowing that the club knows what you're doing. So I know that we talk about on social media, they go, just be careful, because you don't want to step on the club's toes. Certainly for anyone that comes into our clinic to see me from international soccer or A-League soccer or the AFL guys coming through, because I've got such a good working relationship over, nearly 3 decades with doctors, with surgeons and so forth, that if anything, I'll get a call from the doctor going, hey, the young lad's broken down again. Could you just check on his mental state? And I'm not even in the system. I'm in, I'm in it for the boy, the lad. And I think Mike put that so well, where he said, look, you can put your phone on airplane mode, but the one lesson I say to each person in this industry, and even though, we've watched, our good friends Cam Falloon and Richie Burnett do well and with a BFT sale, the reality is the bulk of people that will enter this industry, by the time you've got your private business going, you're working really hard, you're getting a lot of efficacy out of what you do, and that's a really great outcome. If you wanted to make a whole heap of money, you could work half as hard, be mind-numbed, work in investment banking, and make way more money. But that's not why each of you are sitting here and passionate about the industry. So I think just remember that over time, your passion that drives it. Woody talked about, being who he was, the authenticity, building the relationships, don't be cagey. They're the critical moments. So if there are any S&C coaches sitting out there, don't sit there in fear of that sports doctor or that surgeon or that, the physio that's perhaps maybe got a bit of a complex, or your perception of that information. And I think it's really important that you break down those barriers so that you can improve your relationships. Because once your relationships are improved, then away you go. And I was thinking tonight, what's your definition of delegation? So if I'm Chris and I'm saying, right, okay, I want this glute program, and there's an S&C coach that's just started at West Coast Health, and we've certainly go through that. And, seeking first to understand what that guy knows. So I can sit there, because we're all time poor, we're on the hop and doing what we do. But then to say to Chris and say, Chris, well, okay, well, here's your program. We need a lot of hip hinge stuff. We're going to do a lot of anterior oblique chain, posterior longitudinal stuff. We're going to do all that. We've got the measures we're going to do. Now, that language is something that, it may be clear to us, and that person may be somewhat different in terms of what their perception of, even though in our minds it's perfectly clear. So, someone like Bucks is a ripper at all this sort of stuff, where he talks about how he breaks down the language. And so they understand, not only do we need to understand the scientific jargon and be able to share that together in that middle of that Venn diagram, but also what we need to be able to do is ensure that the language we're using actually means the same thing. And so what's your definition of honesty? What's your definition of, if we can find that correct language, then your delegation process is, well, I need that program, and in my head, that's what I thought I was getting. And is your S&C understanding it? So you can see also, we've got the issue of learning. We've got the issue of a master's in S&C. We've got the issue of a sports master's physio. And not only are they trained differently, but we want to make sure that the language they're using actually means the same. And that actually, you've got to spend a bit of time with people. And that's why you'll often see in the sports sector that each of you all know that, is it that, by the time I've got, I've been through 4 different roles at a footy club, but I know that S&C understands what I'm saying. Or the AFL coach says, I know that assistant coach understands what I'm saying. So I just can't, enforce enough to those S&Cs to be, if you're really passionate, you really want to go to that next level, make contact with these people, stalk them even to a point. I'm not saying get a police order out on you or anything like that, but certainly make those connections with people. And so all of a sudden you're understanding. I mean, for anyone in rehab, as Chris will say, like, your perception of how you rehabilitate, a hip scope becomes very different after you've watched one. And so the more tangible information you guys can get, the more common language you can get, the more of that Venn diagram becomes not a small little space, but a very large one. I tell you what, that's the sort of stuff that's going to build a lot of success in what you do.
That's great, mate. And you mentioned the importance of building that relationship in a leadership position for a facility. Like, you have the ability where your physios and strength and conditioning coaches are actually in the same building, so that must help, opposed to obviously working via email and those sort of communication platforms where other clinics may have to do if they're not working together. But and I imagine it happens at time in your facility where they are butting heads and they're not seeing eye to eye, but they're managing the same athlete. From a leader's perspective, how do you?
Are we saying in the facility, or are we saying in the or just out with? Are they at a footy club?
No, within your facility. So for business owners that
would never happen. Would never happen. Like, in terms of, there could be a butting head around some comfortable dialogue, because I would get my experienced S&Cs to be wanting to challenge the physio. But the other thing we do to break down those barriers, if we had a Mike Crichton working, I'd have him present a lot of information to the physios, because the physios have received their training and that's what they do. And I would have the physios doing a lot of presenting to Mike. And so Mike already understands that, you know what, he's actually not that strong in that area. Or we always know that Dave is coming from that space, or Ryan's coming from that space. So you understand, and it's the same with orthopedic surgeons. You know, I've got orthopods, and I'm sure Chris does this all the time, where you go, you know, he's 65, and he's plays golf at, you know, Royal Melbourne, and there's a surgeon that's just perfect for that kind of bloke, because he'll want to get back to 18 holes. And then there's, you know, someone who wants a surgeon that's prepared to push the boundaries a bit, because this bloke goes, I can't just get back to that level of KPI. I want to get back to that in my life. And then, of course, you've got athletes, again, that are that level of, you know, you couldn't have a conservative orthopedic surgeon working in alignment with a footy club. It just wouldn't happen. You've got to have someone at time who's prepared to take a risk to go, we've got to get this player back for the finals.
Mm.
So, you know, I think healthy dialogue's good, and I think always the S&Cs should be pushing the high performance. Obviously, you have to understand all the different dynamics of what's going on amongst medical docs. But I've also seen some really funny stuff, where you've also got to stay within your lanes. And so, you know, there was a AFL club last year, for instance, where, let's call it a high performance coach who has an area that is, you know, is his area of high performance at the football club. But now he's not a surgeon. But yet at that football club, that particular high performance coach was not able, the surgeon was not able to guarantee a surgery had gone through unless it was ticked off, not by a panel, including the medical department, but just the high performance coach. Now, for mine, you've got to stay within your lane. You seek the advice from an expert in another area. You're not, by the time you're a high performance coach, you're not an orthopod, a sports doc. You've got to surround yourself with good people, good relationships, and create that Venn diagram. So the same model we've used in, you know, in high performance environments, and people have got your back, and you're using similar language, is the same thing you can create in your private sector. And the thing is, when your people come in, and even if it's for a hip replacement, or as Chris was saying, you bring in the force plates and those sort of things, the technology you use with athletes all of a sudden gives the opportunity for, you know, for them to say, oh, mate, I was next to, you know, a certain player yesterday. I was next to Juddy or whatever else, and that was great. You know what? I'm doing similar sort of stuff that he's doing. And that just helps drag up the quality of of the whole environment. It can create an environment also that is not always, it doesn't mean it's going to include everyone, but that's okay too. As Mike was saying, you're going to attract actually certain sorts of patients into your place that are motivated, and they want to get better, and they want to get the best outcomes, and that works perfectly, because that's what you want, a high performance center, not just for your athletes, but also for your general population.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Tigers. We could go on all night, mate.
No, I was going to say, get Sean. I feel so sorry for Sean. Sean looks, he's had 4 pec stretches, 7 yawns, and rubbed his eyes 9 times. So get the poor bloke on.
I reckon he's ready to roll. We're finishing with energy. That's what I thought. It could get late tonight, so I thought we'll have Sean at the end, and he's just going to pick us up. Thanks to Schleiger. If for the athletes as well as coaches, practitioners, parents that want to send their kids to your clinic, where's the best place to get in contact?
So it's just, I'm more aligned with the old blokes in the group. So anyone with a bald head and my grey beard, just remember it's the Sports Clinic of Melbourne. That's where I work. Vic Active is still going to be doing a little bit of work this year just to put a bit of political pressure on the landscape. We've got some stuff coming out in the next couple of weeks in Victoria just to make sure that we get an essential service type scenario going. So there's a couple of things there coming out in the next month that I've just sort of got humming along in the background. And then I've got the Instagram Tim Schleiger coach page. But, you know, any of that sort of stuff, people can find me if they want. And if they don't, that's fine too. It's all good.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, folks. Next up, we have Sean Baker, founder of Peak Performance. His centre is located in Adelaide. His topic will be discussing creating a systematic approach to programming for a private sector gym. Thanks for jumping on, Sean. Oh, hold on, mate. What do we need to do here? What was the trick, Durham?
It was
we go.
you got it.
Oh no, that's you, Durham. What does he need to do?
So I just got rid of private chat, and I noticed that I had myself muted. So if you get rid of the little arrow to get rid of private chat and then unmute yourself, that might be the trick.
Take private chat down. Is private chat up for you, Sean? From my end, you're unmuted. Nah. You're the last speaker, mate, so we're just going to have to persist with it. I'm backing you in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
Guilty.
You beauty.
Well done.
Oh, shit.
Well done, mate.
No, all good. I just had to go into settings and change the microphone, boys. What I was saying is I really apologise. I hope I wasn't too disrespectful there. On my screen, I thought I was small enough to get away with a couple of stretches. And hopefully Lockie can empathise with me here. I've got a 2-year-old daughter and haven't slept for about 3 days. She's been sleeping sideways in our bed. So, my apologies. And, certainly no, I've loved all of the presentation so far. Love the diversity and keen to get stuck into it. Just double checking you can still hear me all right there, Jacko?
Sure can, mate. No,
Good man.
let's do that. Let's dive in, and no need to
All right.
apologies, mate. You've done well to get the volume on. We're eager to hear what you're going to say. But yeah, let's start with what are some key constraints to understand when designing a program for a high performance facility?
Yeah, so I guess probably where my passion comes for this topic is, potentially, and you guys might have had similar experiences, coming out of university, for example, even to an extent a master's degree. I was fortunate that I had lots of practical experience and picked up a fair bit through there. But, being an owner of a private facility now and even facilitating interns that come through, any of the football or cricket or lacrosse gigs that we have, is that programming is the most exciting yet overwhelming aspect of probably our job early on in our career. There's so many times where you get an intern come in and I just sort of like to challenge them and ask them the question, do you have a philosophy that you like to abide by? And I think social media is a wonderful thing that you get all the resources from all these amazing coaches, that we have on this panel and from a million other sources, the wonderful man, Joel Seedsman, for example. You see all these, exercises that are sexy, exciting. Some of them have their place in programs, but can cause a student or a new coach to become overwhelmed, essentially. And they're just not sure where to start. So sometimes we see instances where there's a million exercises up in this cloud, this library that they've got of exercises, and they just don't know where to start. There's other circumstances where they probably just lack the knowledge, whether it's from a movement or a muscular point of view. Maybe it's just, a exercise library point of view that they create programs that aren't really well-rounded. So, we say, okay, create a lower body strength program and say, okay, a leg press, a trap bar dead, a leg extension, a lunge, and a front squat, all in their own right, can be fantastic exercises, but all put into that sequence can be, obviously pretty imbalanced depending on what you're trying to achieve and who you're working with. And then On the other side of the coin, you might get guys who have put massive amounts of energy into creating a program. They've created this perfect program. It might be dumbbell Bulgarian squats. They're doing single leg RDLs, cable abduction, and so on and so forth. But they don't program with any foresight of where they're going to progress that athlete to, or any hindsight of where that athlete has worked previously. And then probably the last thing that I want to touch on in terms of the reason why I think this is such an important topic, aside from those new coaches coming through, is that all of us, are involved in some sort of private facility. And I think creating a systematic approach to programming is a really fantastic way of ensuring, those guys who start these facilities and become successful based on particular ideology and principles, they have that filtered down the ranks of their programming, because programming can be quite, individualized, quite a personalized experience for each coach, and you probably differ in some sort of ideology. If you can find ways, so all the coaches that go out to Athletes Authority, there is a hint of Lockie's ideology, potentially is plyometric continuum, or we were over there on the weekend, talked about their rehab continuum and so on and so forth. I think it's important to have some sort of consistency from coach to coach, but still allow some sort of creativity. So, without going into a massive monologue, I'll try to pump through it nice and quickly. For example, we think a really great starting point for the majority of our 360-degree sports. So you're talking about basketball, football, netball, potentially rugby, these sorts of court and field-based sports, just purely from our experience, certainly not written in any particular book. And you'll see themes of probably Coach Woody here, because he was my era. I graduated my master's degree in 2015, so that was prime time Woody. So you start to look at your push pull, squat, hinge, lunge, so on and so forth. And then also more recently there's been the Lachlan Wilmots of the world who have really impacted the industry. So you probably see a bit of a blend in terms of where this principle comes from. So essentially we think that maybe we can flesh it out a little bit further than maybe Woody's Big Six. We go the Big 10. So we do squat, hinge, lunge, and thrust or hip extension. We think they're four primary lower body movements that probably need to be ticked off in about 80% of most circumstances if everything else is well and good. Push and pull, I like to separate those. I think vertical push and horizontal push are very different. I think vertical pull and horizontal pull are very different. And then usually in our trunk options, usually maybe like a rotation or an anti-rotation. So those, the 10 big foundational movement patterns that we'll try to nail down. Mm-hmm. And now you're saying, okay, yeah, it's all well and good, Bakes. Like, so fine, you say those movements. Well, how do you sort of decipher which one is appropriate? So usually the next thing that we get our interns and young coaches to do is for each of those 10 movements, I want you to decipher what do you think is the most basic, regressed, unloaded, beginner variation of that movement pattern that you can think of. And then what's every little baby reaching step all the way through to the most progressed, loaded, potentially unstable in some circumstances, advanced style of that movement that you can think of. And that essentially creates your movement exercise continuum. We say continuums a lot. Again, Lockie has brought that into popularity. I think it's good to use terminology that people understand as well. So essentially you've got 10 continuums. And then from there, it's about you deciphering as a coach using your methodology, your ideology to develop an appropriate movement screening or testing protocol that in turn will help you to decipher which level of each of those 10 movement patterns that person's up to. So, look, they've got a wonderful squat, so we're going to get them doing a barbell box squat, for example, but their hinge is a bit average. So let's just get them on the GHD just to get them into that movement pattern to start off with, and so on and so forth. And then you build the other 20% of the program around, potentially what are they trying to achieve out of it? What's their injury history? It could factor into, maybe it's as simple as, some nice complementary exercises in there as well. So, often if everything is all well and good, you can pair up your hinging pattern with a knee dominant hamstring. So you're hitting both ends of the hammy. You could be, complementing your hip thrust with some abduction work, so that you're hitting, two very primary movements of the glutes as well. And all of a sudden you've fleshed out a pretty, I think, extensive and well-rounded program in a short amount of time. potentially working in a group scenario in a private setting. It can be quite highly individualized. So maybe every person in a 30-person squad, that's unrealistic, but let's just talk hypothetically, is doing a different squat pattern, a different hinge pattern, a different lunge. But really the crux of what they're doing is all very similar as well. So that is essentially, a bit of a systematic approach to programming, really condensed, that we do sort of implement at Peak, so that, no matter which coach you align with, at the end of the day, there is some hint of, Sean Baker's programming there. And I'm really confident in, sending any athlete to any of our coaches, depending on their availability and the situation, that the content of what they're providing really aligns with what the Peak brand is as well.
Yeah, love it, mate. Thanks for giving us that background on your philosophy and how important it is to, like you mentioned, every coach is going to develop their own philosophy in their own way. But don't get too caught up in the Instagram early days. Try and learn off an experienced coach. I think that's great advice.
And the other thing as well, so just to chop you off there, is that potentially, setting something out like that system can sometimes help you, conceptualize some of those exercises. Does it fit into any of these patterns? Is it a squat? Is it a hinge? Is it a lunge? Okay, if it's not any of those, is it an accessory? And potentially, what as an accessory, could that complement, or could that address that is not being addressed in our big 10 movements? And then from there, if it doesn't do anything, is there a genuine point why I'm implementing this in our program? The other thing I should probably touch on, I'm trying to push through here for you as well, is that we talked about those 10 being really important for our 360-degree sports. We've got some track athletes that we work with, and potentially, I don't think that, for our 100-meter sprinter, that a vertical push, for example, is really that important. We might chuck that in there as an accessory, for example. So we've got a different set of parameters for our track and field athletes. So, horizontal vectors are probably a lot more from at least an upper body point of view anyway, are more important for us. And then you might say, okay, I really think that elbow flexion and extension is a primary movement pattern for a track and field athlete. So let's flesh out a continuum for that. Or I think trunk anti-extension, or your planking variations too. So really, as long as you've deciphered what are the key movement patterns for the athlete or client that you're working with, or the population you're working with, what's the continuum of exercises within that movement pattern, that's going to make your life a lot easier, and programming for potentially a lot more people than you might do in a pro sector environment as well.
And you mentioned screening, and let's throw testing in there as well.
Yeah.
What do you test, and how does that fit in with your philosophy with these 360-degree athletes?
Yeah, so from a movement point of view, we've probably played around with a few different variations. We've had influence from Ian McCowan, who's high performance at Port Adelaide, who did his PhD on the AAA, and I did some work under him when I was working for Port Adelaide Development. So, that was something we played with as well. We're actually sort of just exploring now the valved movement screen assessment as well. There's some new tools there that we're going to have a bit of a squeeze at. Simply we've got some coaches that will do sort of just work their way through the continuum. So they might do a bodyweight squat. Yep, you've ticked that off. Okay, let's go into a split squat. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go into a Bulgarian. Okay, that's all sweet. Now let's add some load. And they sort of work their way down the chain and maybe identify a point down that continuum in which that they think there's a limitation or something they can work on. So we're probably really and still playing around with that. I still don't truly believe, there's one perfect movement screen that we've come across yet, potentially that ticks the boxes for everybody we come across. In terms of performance testing, we're big on the force platforms. So generally we do a lot of counter movement jumps. We do the hop tests. We do iso mid-thigh pull. They're probably sort of our primary strength and power measures. We do 20-meter sprint, but that's obviously, as we've probably mentioned in a few of the presentations so far, that we're probably limited in space in being able to really make some meaningful gains, and that's probably some marginal gains in your 20-meter sprinting outcome. A couple of reactive agility tests as well, but probably there's a little bit of variability in terms of distances that can be covered depending on which test that you do. If you are adding a reactive component as opposed to just a change direction, but I would say primarily our force platforms are what we rely on the most for giving us performance measures.
And you mentioned earlier with individualization for the sport, so that you tie that into what's relevant from them within your fundamental movement patterns. With the testing, how much do you go into that sort of force velocity profiling, and how does that look for strength and conditioning coaches? Like how do you implement that? How does that influence your decision making from a programming point of view?
Yeah, to an extent, I guess once you've worked through enough athletes, you've generally got a bit of an idea of where you're going to start to tailor, what you're after, and it can be dependent on the stage of the season as well, and potentially sometimes on what that client or athlete asks you or sort of tells you what they're looking for to achieve. But usually we can paint a pretty good picture. So, one of the things we utilize is a pretty simple, DSI, for example. So we look at what is the peak vertical force you can produce in a counter movement jump. How does that compare to your peak vertical force in an isometric mid-thigh pull? What's the difference there? Get a bit of a rough guide. If they're looking at if they can only produce less 60% or less of their peak vertical force in a counter movement jump as opposed to their iso mid-thigh pull, then potentially that rate of force development is a lot more of a focus for us. The guidelines talk to us from the guys that we communicate pretty frequently with that vowed, if it's somewhere between 60 to 80% concurrent training is pretty appropriate. And then conversely, if you're producing 80% worth or more of your peak vertical force in a counter movement jump as opposed to mid-thigh pull, then let's just get those athletes really, really strong. So that's probably, I would say in most scenarios where we do a bit of that force velocity profiling. For some of our court sports in particular, we do look at RSIs on hop tests and things like that as well, and potentially for a little bit of fatigue monitoring too. I would say that they're probably our go-tos in 80% of scenarios.
I love it, mate. That's a great response, and no doubt all the S&Cs listening in have taken down some good notes with the gems you provided there. It's a fun topic to discuss, and we could talk about it all night. But
absolutely,
overall, since running the facility and looking after the programming, what have been some big learnings in your experience so far to wrap it up, this topic?
Yeah, I think, implementing it, and again, it's something that's been reiterated, when we have talked to the guys at Athletes Authority, for example. You certainly want to provide that care and certainly a percentage and an extent of individualization to each person that you work with. But at the end of the day, if you and it's something that Woody goes on about too, nailing those fundamentals is going to be first on your priority list. And you're going to drive yourself insane if you're sitting there, for example, working with 500 athletes. If you're going through and trying to highly individualize and simply, change exercise progressions for the sake of it, so that, John's program doesn't look like Jack's program, when inherently there's nothing really, underlying that there needs to be a change for that there, then it's okay to have a little bit of generalization, for example. I think just reiterating what a lot of the guys have said so far, I think what has really shown in all the presentations tonight is just how much this group of panelists really care about their community. And I think that's helped us to thrive in a situation over the last 2 years. It's been challenging for our industry, but we've been able to maintain more meaningful connections with our communities, and therefore they've rallied around us more. We've been able to keep in contact during ISOs and be able to program some circumstances, send out equipment and things like that as well. So I think that's what really separates, this small, I guess I say small business, just because we're not big chains, but small business S&C facilities that genuinely have a passion for being results driven as opposed to just following through as many numbers as possible. So yeah, just keep caring about it. Care about your athletes, care about your people, and generally the money will flow afterwards, I think.
We'll wrap it. That's a great note to finish on, mate. It was a consistent theme of discussion from everyone, and probably a testament to how late it is at night, probably for everyone except for Chris. He's peaking. It's almost tea time, isn't it, in Perth? But no, I want to thank everyone. We won't do a Q&A at the end. I think there's been jam-packed plenty of information over the last 2 hours. And I want to thank everyone for the time. Sean, for everyone that is listening in, mate, in the podcasting world, as well as those that are tuned in live, where is the best place to get in contact with yourself, mate?
Yeah, Instagram, Peak Performance, but we are PAQ, and it's not that I am dyslexic. It's just a little acronym there for Personalised, Evidence-Based, Applied and Qualified. So that's clearing it up for a few people. There we go. I've spat that out a few times.
Yeah, that was good.
So yeah, at Peak Performance on Instagram, and Peak or Peak Conditioning on Facebook, and just www.peak.com.au.
Fantastic. Well, we'll add in all the links, websites, socials, and all the information in our show notes. So for those listening in, if you tuned in late, head to our YouTube channel to watch the full recording, and we will release bite-sized episodes. So every presentation will become a bite-sized episode on our podcast, Prepare Like a Pro. So thank you for the guest panel, all of you guys, for sharing your time, your experiences, and of course your knowledge with us all. I've got a lot out of it, and no doubt all the listeners have as well. And for everyone that's tuned in with us, thank you for listening in to this live chat. Our next live chat will be with Aaron Kellett, the high performance manager of the Australian cricket team, next Thursday at 8:30 p.m. So that's the 3rd of March. For those listening in the podcasting world, I'll see you guys then.